The shocking truth about Doug's actions turned Joni's world upside down, and the secret she discovered could destroy everything they built. She couldn't forgive him, and now that the truth is out, what Joni Lamb discovered will leave you speechless. She thought she had it all: love, success, and a life with Doug Weiss, but what she discovered left her broken and questioning everything. Following Marcus Lamb's death, Joni and Doug Weiss became even more well-known as a symbol of resiliency and fresh starts. Fans viewed them as the epitome of a strong Christian marriage, faith driven by their love and devotion to one another. Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss had always been a power couple, admired by their followers for their unwavering faith, love, and devotion to one another. The public adored them because they were devoted and unwavering, and they were thought to have a strong foundation of faith and respect for one another. However, it didn't take long for the first indications of tension to appear. At public gatherings, Doug and Joni's interactions started to feel a little strange. They no longer presented the same united front. Their smiles were tight, and there was a noticeable lack of the warmth and chemistry they had shared. Before those who had followed them closely noticed the changes, the couple who had once been inseparable were now frequently seen apart. Doug was less often seen with Joni, and when he did appear with him, it seemed like something had changed between them. They weren't the happy couple that fans had loved for years. These small changes made fans wonder what had been going on behind the scenes. The ideal couple started to whisper that Doug, who had made a living as a trusted marriage counselor, was no longer seen by Joni's side. His presence was becoming less frequent, and when he was, the warmth and connection that had once made their bond so special seemed to be eroding. The couple had once been the epitome of what a solid, faith-based relationship could look like, but now something felt wrong with the silence. Fans who had previously admired their unity began to wonder what was going on behind closed doors as the pressure of public life took its toll. Doug, who had spent years assisting other couples in navigating their relationships, appeared to be struggling with his own Joni's commitment to the Daystar ministry in addition to Doug's. The rumors that they were no longer the open, communicative couple they once portrayed only fueled more speculation. Although there was no official confirmation, rumors about legal troubles and financial issues related to Doug's counseling practice started to circulate. This raised more questions about whether Joni knew about these issues prior to marrying Doug, or if she was caught off guard after they were revealed. Growing prominence in the Christian media world left many wondering if the balance between their public and private lives was becoming too much to handle. When Doug and Joni got married, these rumors suggested that there was more going on behind the scenes than anyone knew, leaving the public in the dark and waiting for answers that hide and never materialized. As the tension between the couple increased, they remained silent and refused to directly address the mounting rumors, which only made the public's doubts worse. Fans who had once admired their ideal marriage now found themselves. As the cracks in their marriage became more apparent, the public's interest only grew, leaving fans who had previously viewed Doug and Joni as the model of a happy, faith-based marriage with more questions than answers. They began to doubt everything they believed they knew about the couple. Were they really the perfect relationship they had always presented, or was there more to the story? And if so, why weren't Doug and Joni addressing it? Continued to expand, it became evident that the ideal couple's image had been destroyed, leaving the public to wonder if they would ever learn the whole truth about what he would do to conquer you. I don't want to say that we discuss sex. I don't tell people that we discuss sex. Two adults would, but he never had sex with me and he never said anything improper. We didn't have sex until he gained a reputation for honesty. I don't want to say that what text we talked about was sexual, and I don't tell people that we talked about sex like two adults would, but he never had sex with me. He never said anything inappropriate, and we didn't have sex until we were married. Joni had told me those things again, shutting them down about the text he was sending you and you were happy. I wasn't sure how to process it. Is well known for his honesty, but this is just sexual talk, okay? That's not it, okay? So when she starts telling me about it, I'm keeping it to myself. I'm getting really stressed out and my body is starting to act really strangely. That's when my panic attack started. But I was saying that when you received the text, she was reading all of this to me. And Rachel and Becca on the other side were full clue. When Jimmy enters the picture as the person she trusted, I don't tell them a word about what's happening. After that, I called Jimmy privately the day before our 6-person meeting with Jimmy Evans because I didn't want to embarrass her or discuss that with her other kids. He will attest to this, and I said, hey, this is something I don't know how to process. For years, Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb were viewed by the public as the ideal marriage, a partnership based on love and faith. Their relationship was not only about personal affection, but also about their shared dedication to their ministry and helping others. Doug was a well-known marriage counselor who had made a living by assisting couples in finding healing and resolving their problems. Following the death of her first husband, Lamb, Joni became a prominent figure in the Christian broadcasting industry, leading Daystar television network. Together, they were seen as a formidable force in both ministry and personal life. But as is often the case in relationships, the first signs of marital disintegration appeared long before anyone noticed. At first, they were only minor changes in their interactions, but they continued to appear in public together, and they continued to talk about their love for one another, but there was a discernible change. At first, it was simple to dismiss the warmth and connection they had shared, as every couple experiences ups and downs. However, as time passed, it became more difficult to ignore Asian Doug, who had always been the focal point of their marriage, as he grew more reclusive and began devoting more of his time to his counseling practice and public appearances. Speaking engagements, his career was taking off, and while that should have been a good thing, it started to negatively impact his personal life. Joni was also preoccupied with her ministry work, and the demands of running Daystar and maintaining appearances were overwhelming the balance that had previously existed. Their shared focus on their faith and family seemed to disappear as Doug's career took off, and somewhere along the line, Joni's commitment to the network grew. The way they drifted at first, the changes were minor. Doug wasn't home as much, and when he was, he seemed preoccupied, checking emails and planning his next event. Joni would try to talk to him, but the exchanges felt forced. They no longer had those lengthy discussions about their days, hopes, and dreams, and their relationships began to feel more like a business arrangement than a marriage. The man who had been her rock seemed to be slipping away, and as the months went by, their interactions became more strained. Joni would ask him what was wrong, but he would dismiss it, telling her everything was fine, but it wasn't fine, and she knew it. That once marked their bond began to fade into something more mechanical. Joni started to feel as though she was living with a stranger, someone she loved deeply but who wasn't there emotionally. Invisible in her own marriage, her attempts to get back in touch with Doug were met with silence, and the more she tried, the more distant he became. It wasn't about fighting, but rather the gradual breakdown of their relationship, and Joni started to question whether it was a passing phase or whether Doug's work was temporarily taking up all of her time. However, as time passed, the gap between them grew, and she began to worry that it might be something more serious. Deeper started to seep into her thoughts. She would watch Doug sit across the room, lost in his thoughts, and wonder what had happened. Where had the man she had fallen in love with gone, and why was he so aloof? She had helped him build his career for years, and now it seemed like she was just a supporting role in his life. Then rumors began to circulate about Doug's mounting stress from years of being in the spotlight. As a well-known figure in Christian media, Doug had been a trusted voice in the marriage counseling industry, helping people behind closed doors. However, the pressure of being in the spotlight started to wear him down. Some people theorized that the scrutiny was too much for him to bear, and it began to affect his ability to connect with Joni. The more people watched him, the more he retreated into himself. The more he withdrew, the more Joni felt abandoned. But there were also rumors that started to circulate about Doug's financial and legal problems. There were rumors of financial mismanagement in his counseling practice, of investments gone wrong, and of contracts that weren't as solid as they seemed. Although nothing was verified, these rumors made Joni wonder if she was aware of these problems prior to their marriage, or if they had only come to light after they were married. Later, she started to feel as though her entire life was built on a number of lies and secrets. How much of what Doug had told her was true? Had he concealed his problems from her, or had she just been ignoring them? These questions followed her around as she dealt with the mounting conflict in their marriage, which was not only personal but also professional. Previously, Joni and Doug had been a formidable team because of their common vision for their ministry, their dedication to Daystar, but as time passed, it became evident that they had different ideas about how the network should develop. While Joni was devoted to carrying on Lamb's legacy and working on the projects that had been initiated year prior, Doug wanted more. He wanted a bigger role in the network, more influence and more control over its course. This conflict of leadership styles increased tension between them. As their relationship deteriorated and their silence increased, neither Joni nor Doug directly addressed the tension. Instead, they continued to appear. Joni, who had centered her entire life on Daystar, felt that Doug's goals were undermining everything she had worked for. Doug, on the other hand, felt that his contributions to the ministry were being disregarded. Together, they gave the impression of unity in public, but behind closed doors, things were disintegrating. Joni tried to maintain appearances by keeping their personal problems hidden, but the strain was getting to be too much for her to handle, and she was unable to ignore the distance that had grown between them. Their marriage, which had once been a source of strength, was now a source of suffering and confusion. Joni's frustration increased because she loved Doug but couldn't continue to live in a kankuole. The bond that had held them together seemed to be slipping through her fingers, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find a way to bring it back. The growing tension behind closed doors wasn't just about the lack of intimacy or the emotional distance, it was about the realization that their marriage was becoming more and more empty, and she couldn't keep acting like everything was fine when it was obvious that it wasn't the love they had once shared. Joni had spent years creating a life with Doug that was meant to be based on love, faith, and support for one another, but now it felt like everything was falling apart. Their silence became deafening, and Joni was forced to face the devastating fact that their once perfect relationship might not be able to be repaired because the tension between them had reached a breaking point, and neither of them seemed to know it. What had once been a warm, supportive relationship full of dreams and respect for one another had gradually turned colder, and the emotional and physical distance between Joni and Doug had grown unbearable. It wasn't a sudden breakdown, but rather a slow, painful unraveling of everything they had built together in their marriage once the picture of stability and faith was hanging. As weeks turned into months, the cracks in their relationship became more obvious. At first, Joni tried to tell herself that it was just a rough patch, something every couple goes through. Doug was busy with his career, and she was preoccupied with her work with Daystar, so it made sense that their time together would be limited. Doug, the man she had once shared everything with, was growing more aloof in their conversations. More than anything else, it hurt that Doug seemed like a stranger to her, someone she no longer recognized. Joni had tried to talk to him about it, asking him what was going on, but each time he dismissed her, their once easy connection seemed strained. The warm, loving exchanges they used to have had been replaced by awkward silences and tense, uncomfortable moments. The silence dragged on, but Joni knew that this wasn't just a phase, that it was normal to have ups and downs. Something deeper had changed between them, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to fix it, couldn't make him open up, couldn't make him understand how much it hurt to feel so alone in a marriage that was supposed to be the most important part of her life. To feel as though she was living in a bubble on the outside, everything appeared to be going well. They were still working together in their ministry and putting on a united front for the world, but on the inside, their marriage was failing. Joni had spent so much time trying to maintain the illusion that everything was fine, but the weight of the silence was getting to her. Doug, on the other hand, seemed unaware of the emotional distance that had grown between them. He was more focused on his work, career, and public image. The man who had once been so present in their relationship, the man who had listened to her, supported her, and made her feel heard, was beginning to break her down every time they shared a meal or sat in the same room. As she attempted to make sense of the growing distance between them, Joni began to wonder if he had ever truly been as invested in their marriage as she had been, or if it had all been a facade, with him always being more focused on his public persona than on their relationship. It wasn't just the emotional distance that hurt Joni, though. It was the growing realization that Doug may have been concealing something from her. Rumors began to circulate regarding Doug's financial situation and the difficulties he was encountering in his career. There were hints of legal issues, financial mismanagement, and the stress of his counseling practice. Although Joni was unsure if these rumors were accurate, they caused her to wonder if Doug had been concealing these problems from her, or if he had been dealing with them for longer than she realized. Despite everything, Joni still loved Doug because she had spent so many years with him, building a life, a ministry, and a family. She wanted to think that he would have shared these things with her, but as their silence grew longer, she started to wonder if Doug had purposefully kept these problems from her. The idea of him keeping secrets was enough to make her feel betrayed. The longer they lived in silence, the more she realized that the marriage she had known might be gone. It wasn't just the emotional distance, it was also the lack of trust and the absence of the connection they had once shared. It was the quiet realization that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get him to open up, see her pain, or fight as much as she wanted to. When Doug quietly moved out of their shared house, it was the final straw for their marriage. Joni had suspected something was wrong, but she never thought it would come to this. It was a silent admission that their marriage was over, and that any bond they had previously shared had vanished. Doug didn't talk to Joni about the move. He didn't sit down with her, discuss what was going on, but he simply packed up and left. And the thing that hurt Joni the most was the silence, the lack of communication, and the sense that he had simply left without even giving her a chance to comprehend how painful the separation was for everyone involved. Not just Joni, but also their friends, family, and followers, who were left to pick up the pieces of a relationship that had Joni, the woman who had founded a ministry based on love, faith, and healing, had been so strong that she was now facing an unavoidable personal heartbreak. She had to face the fact that her marriage, which had seemed unbreakable, was over. The separation wasn't just a personal loss, it was a public event that the world would be watching. Joni had always been the strong, supportive wife who led as a respected Christian counselor whose entire career had been built on helping others through their struggles. Doug found himself on the other side of the equation, his marriage failing, his credibility as a marriage expert being questioned, and his reputation on the line. In contrast, she was left to pick up the pieces of a broken marriage while facing public judgment. The silence was equally damaging for Doug. Doug was struggling to reconcile his public persona with the reality of his personal life. The silence between him and Joni was deafening, and it was beginning to affect everything he did. As the silence continued, Joni and Doug were forced to face the painful reality that their lives were weighing heavily on him. He had always been the one giving advice, but now he needed it himself. The marriage had reached a breaking point, and there was no going back. For Joni, the separation signified the end of their life together, and the marriage they had previously shared. The emotional toll of the separation was enormous. She had devoted so much of herself to their marriage and their family, and now it was all gone. Doug's quiet departure left her feeling betrayed and abandoned. She had supported him and stood by his side for years, and now the fallout from Joni and Doug's separation affected not only their personal lives, but also the ministry they had spent years building. Daystar, which was once a beacon of faith-driven work and leadership, but now found itself at a crossroads. She was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart, and the silence between them was the loudest thing of all. It spoke volumes about the end of their relationship and the pain they had both been carrying for so long. They had been more than just a couple. They had been a symbol of strength, resiliency, and what it meant to live a life dedicated to faith. Their marriage was meant to represent the ideal, a partnership based on mutual love, respect, and shared purpose. But with their split, everything seemed to fall apart for Joni. The emotional toll of the separation was immense, but their marriage's breakdown sent shockwaves through the Christian community. She had spent decades transforming Daystar into one of the most significant Christian networks. Following Lamb's death, Joni took over, carrying on the work that had begun years earlier. The network had grown to become a mainstay of Christian broadcasting, providing millions of viewers with faith-based programming, hope, and healing. The questions surrounding Daystar's leadership and future became even more pressing for her. She was viewed by many as a strong, steadfast individual who had succeeded in transforming personal grief into a goal that benefited countless people. But now that her personal life is collapsing, her integrity is being called into question. They were questioning leadership,